let me start by suggesting that we've had a number of months to work on our own, and supposedly we've all made major breakthroughs in the last 3-4 months. So if anybody has a follow-up question to their breakthrough, let's start with that. And no one has questions. Okay, if no one has questions, then I will start on my, oh, here we go. Susan, please unmute yourself.
Yes. Okay, so yes, I actually did have a breakthrough. I have my husband's grandfather that we really knew nothing about because he died even before my in-laws were married. I was able to find him and discover that.
Where did you find him?
He's in Chorzele, how do you say it? Chorzele, Poland. Chorzele.
Oh, Chorzele.
Yes.
Chorzele.
Chorzele. And I found his father and mother, and then discovered that his father had been married before. And through that discovered 2 half-sisters, at least, so far 2 half-sisters. And lo and behold, found a full brother as well. But I haven't been able to find out anything else about this brother. And I'd love to find out what happened to him. And if there are any other half-siblings. I doubt that there are any other full siblings because the father was twice as old as his mother and died when the 2 boys, grandfather and his brother, were like a year and 3 years old. So unless she remarried, there may be other halves.
Well, that's always a possibility, but let's look at it from, from back. Mm-hmm. We see a new name in a family tree, and it happens so often that say, what happened to this person? Obviously, the time period is very important because so many people were caught up in the Holocaust and there is no trace of them, particularly in that area of Poland, which is, for everybody who's not familiar with Chorzele, we're probably talking about 120 kilometers northwest of Warsaw. In that area, they would have been taken to Treblinka. And if they were taken to Treblinka, there would be no record. There's virtually no record of those who were killed in Treblinka. When was he born?
Okay, so his name is Benjamin, born in 1885.
So 1885, he's not a young man, number one, when 1939. Number two, of course, is that at that age, very few people were given a number and put to work. So he would have gone right away. You see his birth. Is there any indication of a
Of what? Sorry.
Is there any indication of a marriage?
No, I can't find any.
Okay, so here is a couple of things when we're talking about in searching in Poland. As many of you probably know, we are developing a new search system that will be part of the next generation system. And if anybody hasn't seen the presentation, anybody who is interested in Poland hasn't seen the presentation from the conference, be glad to put up a link to the video, which do a peek preview of the next generation search system. One of the things that we are going to be able to do is to be more focused in the research. So in the case of Benjamin, for example, we'll be able to indicate when he was born, and what we're looking for is a marriage record from this period of time. And also, if we know his father and mother, we can put that in. So we don't get, and particularly if you have the name Cohn or Goldberg or Schwartz, you don't get 5,000 entries to, to look through.
Mhm.
One of the things that I am able to do in the meantime is use what is called the X1 Super Search. For those of you who are not familiar with X1 Super Search, I have 602,000 separate files on my computer. Many of them are data files, Excel, and many of them text, doc, and all the rest. So I can find on my computer almost instantaneously. It's a wonderful tool if you are using PC and you can afford $35. Look at getting the X1 search. It's called X1 Super Search. No dash between the X and the 1. So what I could do is put in his name and see if it pops up in another town. Why? Because traditionally the marriage took place in another town, meaning for the males married in another, if they didn't marry a woman from their own town, they married in another town. And often they remained in that town because the father-in-law convinced them, taught them how to be a tailor or a shoemaker, all these different options. As a result, the town name becomes so critical in our data, in JRI Poland data, because that's the way you follow the trail. So if anybody wants to bear with me, I will share screen and I will show you what I'm referring to. Now, what was the last name?
Last name is Lakryc, Lakryc.
Lakryc.
Probably. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now I know where you got your name from. Okay. So I'm going to share screens. Share screens. And I'm going to go to X1. And the next thing I do is I put in under the program I'm looking for, I want Excel. I just have to put the X in. And I'm going to be putting in the name Lakryc. And I will sort. And as you can see, the name Lakryc appears in all these different towns. So Horgeli, of course, but it also appears in nearby, hold on a second, also appears in Chekhanov, which is not far away.
Right.
Now, it appears in a faraway town called Izbica, which is near Lublin, but that may be, do you know what it means, the family name?
Licorice?
I'm sorry?
Does it mean licorice?
I don't know. Maybe it does.
That's what I've been told. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I can look it up in a second. So then we have, also Yanovo. Yanovo is very close to Horgeli. A lot of communication between those two towns. And Moava, another town. So let's put his name in. We'll put in his name was what? His name?
Benjamin.
Okay. Benjamin.
Okay.
Now you see that here he is, born in 1885.
Correct.
And this is the original data entry for those who might be interested. When we were doing the basic indexing, we did the indexing, actually typed it in Cyrillic. It's a special mapping program to map from the Russian to the Polish spelling. So, for example, Susan spells her name Lakritz, while in fact the original Polish is Lakryc. If this had been transliterated by a Russian who's not familiar with Polish spelling, you would have gotten Lakritz. So we don't see him in another town except here, draft dodgers, draft dodgers. Okay, in Ostrava. And what was his father's name? Do you remember?
Wolf Barrick.
Oh, okay. So this father is Abram and Fega. So, but this one's a draft dodger. Um, Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, oh my God, he's not there. What we try to do then, because this is an exact search, is try with BIN, because, you know, Benjamin can be spelled in different ways. Also, what I do next is Lakritz, and I go to the JRI Poland search engine, and I go, and I search, and we'll put in the name Lakritz here, and we'll do phonetically like, meaning very close to, and see what comes up. And you see it comes up in a lot of areas, but the most important one is the Plotsk gubernia. And take a look at alternative spellings. We see 91 is the same. That tells us that the name is likely a specific name for something. For example,
Stanley,
my grandmother's.
Excuse me, on some documents, Wolf Barrick spelled his last name Lakrytz, I think.
He did. Okay. Yes, we see it right here, Lakrytz. And that's because, very interesting, because Kharjeli was part of a Germanic area. And so some people use the Germanic spelling. So let's go back to X1 and see whether it'll come up. So you see how many, and we'll try Benjamin again. And here we have Yanovo. Okay, let's try Benjamin with an E. No, we're back to Kharjeli. That does not mean, by the way, that he disappeared. People don't disappear, but he may have had a second name. So, for example, you see here in a Barak Yosek. Now, presumably, if we look at Barak Yosek, it could be, for example, that Benjamin had a second name, and he was named for two grandfathers. So there's another level of research that one might have to do by looking at all the Lakritz records in all the towns, let's say within 50 kilometers, 75 kilometers. So I don't want to continue going into much further detail at this point, but I just wanted to emphasize that, stop sharing screens. Okay. So I just want to emphasize that there are options to look to find this man. Also, one of the things you can also do is, I use the story that I often tell in the books of residence of many of these towns. That's the population registers that were used over a period of time. The comments column on the right hand side in Polish, uwagi, they give you the army status, reserve soldier, discharged from the army, or did not appear for army service. When that happens, you look at the passenger arrival lists in New York to see if they showed up in there. And I would consider, if I were you, looking at, excuse me, passenger passenger arrival list, because maybe at the age before he married, he emigrated. So that's your option. Okay,
Thank you.
Susan,
Thank you
thank
very much.
you. Who's got a question? No questions. Well, let me bring you up to, oh, here we go. Sue-Ann, unmute yourself, Sue-Ann.
Okay, hi Stanley, how you doing?
I keep on getting older, that's all I can tell you.
I know, I'm in the same boat. So here's my question that I've been discussing with a few people. I am more and more concerned all the time about my data and keeping it and passing it on. And whether it's on the internet, whether it's in paper, what am I doing and what is the right way to do it?
Well, two things to keep in mind. If you want to preserve your data and not have anybody play with it,
Right.
don't post it on Genie, because Genie,
Never.
you know, yeah. That's not to say Genie is terrible, because some people have made huge discoveries using Genie. There are a number of different places where you can deposit your family tree, starting uploading it to Jewish Gen. That would be my go-to place first. You
Okay.
upload a JEDCOM to Jewish Gen.
Okay.
Then you could also upload one to Ancestry. You could also upload one to MyHeritage. These commercial companies love having family trees because people find things and subscribe to their service. There are also other places you can just go to the internet and say, where can I upload my family tree? You know, something like that. It is a topic that has been discussed and again on Jewish Gen. So
Yeah.
also you could go to the Jewish Gen archives, and put in wording that will bring up previous messages of that type.
Okay. Thank you.
All
What
right?
about the paper aspect?
Oh, I just had one
Yeah.
little comment about Jenny or Jeannie or whatever.
Jeannie.
I, many years ago, sent my rough data to a distant relative. He posted it all to Jenny, and it's been a nightmare. There's all kinds of errors and duplications, and so the other caveat is, I guess, be careful who you share your data with.
Thank you.
Okay, so Meryl, before, just let me answer the thing about the paper. Obviously, paper is not something that is going to be passed on and to be useful. So what you have to do is scan it. Now, if they're all 8.5 by 11, that's one thing. Scanning, if you're using a scanner one page at a time, forget it. Get an automatic scanner. I have a snap scan or a scan snap or whatever they call it, and you just feed it through. Excuse me. It's the first time I've seen this where it says potential fraud. Has anybody seen that on their phone?
No.
Yeah, that's something new. It's probably
Yeah,
a new
that's
service.
Samsung. Samsung gives you potential fraud
Okay. Well, that's
built in
the
your
first time
phone.
I've seen it, and it
Yeah.
is a phone number I've seen before. It's a Quebec City number.
Yeah.
So scanning is the critical thing, and if you don't have the patience to scan, bring it all into Bureau on Grow, and they'll scan it for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, Meryl.
I think I may have addressed this topic before, but since you said uploading a family tree to Jewish Gen, I thought I would ask again in case I missed some information because I'm becoming more familiar with it. I found a tree on Jewish Gen that I am sure is my family. The names match, the general years match. There are some errors. I have absolutely no idea who uploaded that. I sent a message through Jewish Gen, and I don't think I got a reply. I contacted somebody who put me in touch with somebody else who hasn't answered her phone or emails. I just have no idea who had some familiarity with my family.
So on the Jewish Gen, you've used the link and you've tried to communicate with the person who put that up.
Yeah, I went to that number with the way you can in Jewish Gen, send a message. And I made it contact. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, what was the number of the researcher? Was it less than 20,000? Do you know offhand?
Probably. I'm not sure, but probably.
Okay. The reason being is because I have a book with the actual names from the Family Finder, researchers, Jewish Gen researchers, up to about number 20,000. So up to 20,000, I can identify who that number is.
So can I look that up and send it to you?
Yes, you certainly may.
Thank you very much. I did actually.
It is, by the way, it is, I won't say it's not a secret because this was a printed thing that Avotenu put out when Avotenu controlled the Family Finder before turning it over to Jewish Gen. Now the numbers are up to what, 800,000 or something like that.
I see. I did at one point contact somebody, I think maybe at Avotenu, Eileen Polikoff, maybe?
Yeah, okay.
And she did give me a name. I think I've even mentioned it to you, Magid, Harold Magid. And somebody put me in touch with who they think is her daughter, because he may have died, but her daughter has I tried multiple ways of contacting her because I was given a phone number and email address and she hasn't answered.
Well, if you frame the message and post it on Jewish Gen, it's amazing how many people know people and will come up with some answers. So put it on Jewish Gen, just post it.
What, I mean, like in the discussion?
Yeah, in the discussion group, just say.
I never did that. That's a wonderful idea. Okay, thank you. I knew you'd come up with some new idea. Thank you.
Well, I've got a hat here with. I pull the rabbits out. Okay, who else has a question? Nobody else has a question. Okay, Vicky, unmute yourself, my dear.
It's only if we're short of questions. I have an ancestor, great-great-grandfather, and the town of Lubranich, Poland.
Lubranich. Yeah.
Appears on his grave. It's the only reference we have to it.
Okay,
and
well,
he would have been born around 1814.
Okay, we may not.
Yeah. Do your records go back far enough?
There are no surviving vital records, but I have the books of residence.
Okay.
And they're not online. So let's take a look and see if we can find something for you.
Well, when he moved to Manchester, England, and his marriage notice that I found in a newspaper, he was using the name Davies, Solomon Davies, which I take to be a patronymic. A few years later, he shows up in a guide as Solomon David Moss, working with a David Moss. And I'm guessing that his father's name was David. He married Sophia Moss, and other people who married into that family appended Moss to their previous last names. So there was a Joel Abraham who married Sophia's sister and became Joel Abraham Moss. So I'm
Okay,
assuming that
so
Moss is a red herring, and that he was using a patronymic of his father, David. So all I have is that the father's name was probably David. His name was either Solomon or Samuel, and he was born around 1814 in Lubranich.
okay, so the Lubranich Books of Residence would not take in anybody born 1814 unless they were still living. When did he actually move to England, as far as you know?
The first record I have of him there is 1836.
In
His
England.
marriage. I don't
That's
have
where,
anything earlier. He shows up in the 1841 census, but you know, his marriage is 1836.
okay, well, he's not likely to appear. The books of residence start in 1890 to 1931. That is the
No,
Russian
no, no,
series. So that's
no.
far too late. But if you write me privately with the information you have, I'll check the file. There's no point in spending time checking that file right here and now. Okay?
Right, but no, I mean, it would have to be very early 19th century. the
Well, we
record.
might be able to get an idea of the family name from
Okay, I'll send
what
you the names and the names of his sons in case, you know, family names recur or whatever.
right. And that brings up the other issue, and it really refers to what I was saying before about our next generation system. We have had a number of cases in the case of JRI Poland, and it's in other countries as well, where people know the names of all their grandparents, siblings, etc., but don't know the original family name. What
Yeah.
could the family name be? Because it's, you know, it's in the case of my cousins, the Taylors in Poland, it was Hyatt, the Hebrew for Taylor. That was an easy one, and that I knew that right from the beginning. However, there was a case in Bialystok a number of years back, and we've had many, but where this man knew the names of 5 siblings. So what we did, we didn't have the facility to do that online because it would have been too involved. We simply sorted the file, the original data file, with that family name, with those given names, or I mean, they were all in anglicized names, but we figured out which ones were the likely to be the Hebrew ones or the Yiddish, Polish names. And there was only one family that came up that had 4 of the 5 siblings, and it was a logical name, meaning to say it may have been Nuskovich that was changed to Nathan or something like that. It was an obvious one, and of course it turned out to be correct. So that mystery of what the original name is, beside all the other different resources, depending on which country and depending on the amount of data that's available from the town where they lived, it is possible to find out the family name. In the case of Gary Leon is a man from the United States, and he did not know what his family name was. He went to Poland, and he went to under incredible research guidance from a lady who was the former archivist in the Torin archives. They managed to figure out some hints, and then he got the complete information on the family in a notarial record. And for anybody who was doing research in Poland, the notarial records were started under Napoleon, and that's why we have the notarial system in Quebec. Basically, it's a part of the French tradition of the notarial records. You know, in many other jurisdictions, the lawyers are actually handling all. So that's just another option. Again, if you have Polish roots. One of the interesting things about Polish notarial records is the degree to which they have survived. I did a search this morning for notarial records in Poland, and there are 14,000 separate collections of notarial records in the Polish State Archives at the present time. 14,000 something. Because I forgot to put the town name in search. I just put in notary or notarialny or something, whatever is spelled in Polish. So an idea of the kind of material that's available, and it's not, Poland isn't the only place where they have that type of information. There are court records and there are property records, etc., where you can find information. Keep in mind, they didn't have photography. What photography wasn't used to the degree that we use it now, or in the last, let's say, 75 or 100 years. As a result, people had to be identified by their circumstances, by their wife's name, their father's name, the mother's name, the children's names. So sometimes you have a complete family tree within the notarial records. And if you're interested in that information about notarial records, on the JRI Poland website, there is an article by Ania Wernicka of Warsaw, who is an expert on notarial records in Poland, and probably they're applicable to some other areas as well. And the way to find it is simply put in Google JRI Poland notarial records and come up. But I'm not going to spend more time on that, but if anybody's interested, they could follow up on that. So another question, somebody put their hand up. Nobody's going to put their hand up. Oh, here we go. Anne, please unmute yourself.
I've been trying to get some information about my grandmother. She was born in 1874 in Skachev, Poland. So you told me that all the records from Skachev were destroyed. So I knew that I couldn't get any information there. I tried to, she moved at some point, I think during her childhood, to England. I don't know where in England. And at some point she came over to the United States and lived in New Jersey and then Rochester, New York. So I tried to follow her back from Rochester. I followed the New York census. Her name was Norma Ann Gingold, at least that's what I thought. But on the census, she was listed as Anna Gold. And other people, I think other siblings, called themselves Gold or Gould. And after that, I didn't know, I'd like to know either when she got to the United States or when she left England or something, but I'm not sure where to go, how to find that information.
Okay, there's a couple of things. First of all, you can reach out to the English Genealogical Society of Great Britain and ask for advice.
Oh, okay.
There are people in society who are professionals, but there are also people who will just try to give you an answer. The professionals, are helpful unless you give them but of course you can give them a case. Now, on the case of Skachev, did I mention to you that there is an index book to the books of residence? Did I mention that?
No.
Okay. I'm not sure whether it's been fully. Good morning, Menachem.
Hey, how are you? I didn't even know that I was on video. I'm running around like crazy. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop my video.
Okay.
Have a wonderful session. We'll watch
All right.
you.
Okay, so you can ask questions in Menachem. I want to share screens, and I'm going to go to
Wow, Stanley. באמצע הסשן של הגניאולוגי. אני עובר, אני רציתי פשוט לחלוק ולסגור את...
Hold the conversation while we're working on this case. So what we're doing is now we're going to look for Skachev. Anybody who's interested, Skachev is a town southwest of Warsaw. And the records, the vital records of Skachev, according to what I know from people from the town, were purposely destroyed as a way of hiding the Jews from the Nazis. But, you know, the mezuzah on the doors was enough to give everybody away. And so this is the original data files. And these are just what I call, no, we don't have, these are the different sources that people have found from Skachev: stores, forced labor, and here's some miscellaneous sources that was collected for my family from Skachev, which was the Videlits, not my family, a family with the same name. So you have indexed registers of inhabitants. So there is something there. Here's Itzik Videlits, son of Gil, Solomon, son of Gil. Then you have water charges. So there, another thing. And this is birth attestations. And those are we'll call protocols of birth that were made separate from the vital records, but based on. Then we have the criminals. We have voters. We have Jewish stores in 1939. We have workers in 1941. Forced laborers. So there is some information, whether it is relevant for your family or branches of your family. That's another story. I can't answer that question. But this is the inhabitants register. That is the one where you should be able to find something for the family. Unfortunately, we have not been allowed to scan it because that would have been the easy way to move forward. So I will stop sharing screens. The other thing that you can do, and I urge people to do that, is to reach out to everybody else who's a Skachev researcher. Let's say start with Jan Meisel's, what's her last name? Okay, whatever. And she posted today on Jewish Gen. Jan Meisel's Alan. And she is an avid researcher. She's explored a lot of information from the town. She hired Petra Schroeder. Petra Schroeder is an expert researcher in Łódź to go there and to find everything she possibly could. So that's another option for you, to try to find something from the town. Okay, next question, please raise your hands. Well,
Stanley, Sue
okay,
has
yes.
her hand up.
Let me try me first, and then we'll come to Sue.
Me first?
Jenny, go ahead.
Okay.
No, you're muted. Jenny, you're muted. Unmute yourself.
Okay, hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Good. Harris Weinberg wrote a book about Montreal social stuff. And in it, I find the Goldberg Gershom that I have been hunting for, and I've made no further steps to find him. I know when he arrived, I know when he died, can't find the census records. My question is, in Harris Weinberg's book, he says that the Goldbergs originated in Calvaria. Am I pronouncing it right?
Calvaria.
Calvaria, right. And of course, I haven't found much in the way of Calvaria records to help me. And Does anybody know this Harris Feinberg book? And do you think he was obviously an old man? Did he really write accurately, do you think?
Okay, so there are resources
Mm-hmm.
in Montreal. There's the who's who, the family who's who. When did this Mr. Goldberg die?
1895, and he's buried at the Charite, the Spanish and Portuguese Charite
Okay.
Vale. And very, very sadly, the top half of his headstone is missing. So we don't know a father's name or whatever.
Gary, is there an option that you can think of, or is Gary off now? Gary may have had to leave. He has a funeral to attend.
Oh,
Well, there is something called the family who's who. Is everybody familiar with the family who's who?
no.
Anybody doesn't know about it?
No, I don't.
Oh,
I'm
Okay.
familiar, and there's a lot of errors regarding my family. People were guessing, and they guessed wrong.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
although it can be a good source of information, but take it with a grain of salt.
Good. Okay.
well,
I'd like to
for
hear
me,
more.
it was a breakthrough to find the name of my third great grandfather born about 1800. So let me show you what this
Okay.
book looks like. I'm not going to schlep over to the filing cabinet, but I'm going to bring up
Maybe-
the,
Hold on.
okay, just share, I have to share screens again. So if I want to find this quickly, I X1 again, I go to PDF and I do family who's who. Okay, let me make this larger. So this is the book,
Mm-hmm. It's a book, right?
and
Here it is, Stanley. Here's the
sorry.
Here's the book.
Yeah, okay. So,
Ah,
and now I've got
Big
a,
book, folks.
now we want to get down to Goldberg. Goldberg, right?
yes. Gershom.
Okay. We have Goldenberg. Oh, so you,
So there's a lot of them.
all right. So
Yeah.
we have Goldberg, Abraham, and what we do, of course, is look for his ancestors. No, no ancestors listed there.
Mm.
Earl Harvey, and his mother was Joseph Goldberg.
The trouble is we have no names further back from Goldberg.
Well, no, but he here as a forebear,
Okay.
and I don't see him. But if you write me privately, I will send you the Goldberg pages, and you could look
I'm happy
through
I'd
them.
too. I'd love
What I just wanted to do was to illustrate how valuable this can be if you have your family is listed. So I'm just, so here, for example, of Alton Goldblum, Dr. Goldblum, everybody knows who Dr. Goldblum was in Montreal.
Mhm.
And so we show him the son of Samuel, and born in 1855 in Neustadt, Lithuania. That piece of information, Neustadt, can be a huge door opener if your family is listed and you've got towns, not just Lithuania, but the town name itself.
Mhm.
And then here's his son, Alton's son, Victor, who was a member of parliament, a pediatrician in Montreal, the man who saved Expo 67.
Mm.
And then, of course, there's another another book, and we have an index that we can search that is not yet online, but we have an index we can search in a number of different ways, thanks to the work of Ari Schiffman, who indexed that.
Mhm.
In addition, there's another book that you may be familiar with, and that is the pardon me. Canadian Who's Who. This is so much easier than, yeah, well, unfortunately. Who's Who in Canadian Jury. Okay, so this is an example of what the page looks like. So you've got son of Samuel. This is Alton Goldblum again.
Mm.
Victor. How did I end up by coming to this page? Now that's Bichert. And so you've got his complete history, where he practiced in pediatrics, where he lectured at McGill, so forth, including a photograph.
Mm.
And we have an index to this as well. We're planning to put it on our website. There is a question of copyright, which
Mm.
we've never resolved.
Right.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
we'll stop.
Two
Stop.
books.
So these are just, as I said before, these are just options to find more information about a family.
Yeah.
In the Canadian Who's Who, those were people who were recognized in the community. In the case of the family Who's Who, the first one I showed you, you actually had to subscribe, make a donation to the Hebrew University. This was a fundraising project for Hebrew University in Canada. So it's, like I said, can be a very valuable source of information. Andres, you have a question? Unmute yourself, please.
About the Montreal Gazette, it's online, I think. Maybe you can find something there.
I'm sorry.
The Montreal Gazette, the newspaper.
Oh yeah,
I've been through
Yeah.
all of that and I picked up an odd advert and a few things. Yes. So that's
if
how
you're
I
a
got the Street Craig list off of that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea.
if you are a member of the Jewish Public Library, you actually are given a link to search the Montreal Gazette. And you're right. But keep in mind that the Montreal Star, you know, in terms of the obituaries, the birth announcements, etc., up until the war, it was the Canada Adler was a very, very important source of information. You still had a lot of people with immigrant ties, and so you would have the Yiddish. That's why our society has been raising funds over the years to index the Adler obituaries. And we've almost completed most. It costs us about $1,000 a year to hire we don't do it. We make the donation to the Canadian Jewish Archives. They hire a Yiddish speaking person to go through these pages in the Canada Adler and to make the obituary index. And that's where, although my grandfather died in New York in 1930, that's where his obituary appears in Montreal. In addition, after the war, most of the go-to places for listings of marriages and deaths and engagements was in the Montreal Star. And it was only when the Montreal Star ceased publication that you had everything go to the Gazette. So you have to be looking at a number of different sources. And for those who are not aware, one of the most valuable sources, of course, is the Canadian Review. And the Canadian Jewish Review, which can be searched through the JGS of Montreal dashboard that created by Gary Perlman. Is everybody familiar with the dashboard? If you're not, please raise your hands.
Stanley, I think Sue is still patiently waiting.
Okay, so which are we talking about, Sue Ann Ray?
No, Sue. Just plain Sue.
Well, I don't see her. Oh, there she is. Yes, over on the right-hand side. Okay, so Sue, go ahead.
Yes, Sue Diamond, actually. So I'm trying to find somebody else who's looking possibly for the name Eisenberg in Montreal. And I don't know if anybody in this group is. So if they are and they want to contact me, it might be helpful for either of us.
Well, okay, so everybody probably knows an Eisenberg. I grew up with a Herbie Eisenberg. I was in AZA with Herbie Eisenberg. But there are many different. Eisenberg is a very well-known name, either spelled, the AJ or the AI and all the rest of it. So the important thing is, of course, to identify which Eisenberg family you're talking about. Do you know which family? I mean, do you know the names?
So you may remember talking to me years ago, Stanley. We were at a conference together around probably 1991. I think what's it called? The Quebec Family History Society had a conference. You know who I am now? We talked about the motorcycle.
Yes.
So you have to remember me by that. So I've now narrowed it down to the name of Eisenberg that I'm looking for. And if I could give you all that information, I could probably find the answers myself. But through DNA, I've realized that the surname I'm looking for is Eisenberg. There's strong connections to Philadelphia and to possibly New York. And then some of the other branches that might be on the maternal line would be in Chicago and so forth. And in fact, a person that I was helping wrote back to me a couple of days ago saying that you had been in touch with her when I had suggested that she put her DNA and her father's DNA from Ancestry onto FTDNA. You saw it and wrote to her. I'm a distant relative to her, and you must be a closer relative to her. So anyway, all these things are, there's a confluence of energy, let's say, when it comes to Montreal, where Mr. Eisenberg would have roots of some kind. Now, whether he ever stayed there, I don't know. And so this is why I didn't elaborate, because I don't want to confuse the audience. But I know that there's a strong connection to Philadelphia, and how the Montreal, somebody may have gone up there and stayed for a while and come back, or gone to New York. I don't know.
Okay, so let me just zero in very quickly. Number one, what was the time period we're looking at for Mr. Eisenberg?
So in Montreal, I would say he would be there in 1932. So okay. I would say 30 to 35 for sure in that area.
Okay, so a couple of things. When would he have been born? About?
I can only guess. I would guess that, like, his son was born in 32.
Okay. So if that's the case, first of all, you know that the Drouin records, the birth marriage records, are online on Ancestry. However, my dear wife fully extracted those records 15 years ago. And we have that database. We tried to make a deal with Ancestry. All they've got is a basic index made by non-English speaking people. And so what we can do is we can generate a file with all the Eisenbergs. Eisenberg as the child, the mother's name, the father's name. So that would give you a head start in terms of trying to construct a family tree of the different Eisenberg families. And then, of course, as far as death records are concerned, if you put in Eisenberg in Jober, you're going to get all the death records from most of the cemeteries other than the Temple, the Shar Shamayim, and the Spanish and Portuguese. So, excuse me, you can collect all the info. Then, of course, there's census records from 1910, 1920. Next year, we'll have the 1930 census. Fortunately, it's been a long wait, but we'll have that. So that there's another option to find the Eisenbergs. You can also search on the Canadian Jewish Review, because one of the nice things about the Canadian Jewish Review is sometimes you get a picture of the family. The Canadian Review get you know, a wedding or an anniversary, and they say, you know, aunt and uncle and sister and brother and came from Philadelphia, and all sorts of information that can be pieced together and find out who the man on the motorcycle was.
Okay.
So I have a question. No, it's Sue Ann Ray. You had a question? Another one? Okay, so Susan.
I had a comment about the Eisenbergs. I'm from Philadelphia. There are a lot of Eisenbergs in Philadelphia. I don't know anyone in particular, but have you tried their genealogical society and asking questions? They have a Facebook group for Jewish genealogy in Philadelphia, for example. You might be able to make some headway there.
Good idea. Very good. One of the things that I emphasize is that you can never stop looking. You can never say, I've tried everything, for a couple of reasons. First of all, there's always somebody smarter than me who's going to give me an idea, a suggestion. You know, this morning they announced, there was an announcement on the lists about the Holland America passenger lists. And I had family that traveled on the Holland America line. And my wife and I, my wife is Dutch, so we spent a couple of days in Rotterdam at the archives that have the Holland America line records. And we found amazing amount of information. Most people don't think of Rotterdam as being the port where people emigrated from. It, you know, it's Hamburg. It was the number one. Bremen, the records did not survive the passenger lists. But on the other hand, you have the arrival records, which indicate which line somebody was on. As a result, new information, that's what the point I'm trying to make, new information is becoming more readily available all the time. You see Ancestry and MyHeritage announcing massive, and Family Search announcing massive uploads, 5, 10, 15, 20 million records. It's hard to imagine, but Family Search now has 300 plus, more than 300 cameras operating around the world, scanning records. And it's so much faster than the old days when they did microfilming, because of the way in which the processes worked. plus the cameras and the equipment is now so much more sophisticated that the post-processing has become incredibly easier. Family Search is also doing something very interesting, as is most of the companies, and they're trying to develop handwriting recognition based on artificial intelligence, teaching a program how to read a specific handwriting. And there's been some remarkable advances in it. And as a result, that will increase not only the benefit of the original microfilming of the sources, but actually the use of the material becomes so much becomes available so much so much faster. You know, they in the case of, let's say, Family Search, they go in and they scan a collection. They put up the scans, and you have to start looking through all the scans. It might be 1,000 or 10,000 to try to find what you're looking for. And if it's not indexed, it's really a problem. So that's one of the reasons why handwriting recognition can be incredibly invaluable in the future. And so many different technologies in that regard. Any other questions? Okay, Meyer.
Hi, Stanley. I'm going to, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to share a document, which is the Polish copy or affirmation of the marriage of my grandparents. So the document is from 1922, and the marriage was 1901. You said you have the book of residences. So maybe you can find my grandmother, because I spoke to
which town?
They were married in Rovno, but she was born in Turisk.
Married where?
Turisk. Okay, hold on a second. I'll share the document. Do you see it?
Oh, in Rovno. Okay.
The marriage is Rovno, but you see her name is here, Rikla, daughter of Leibush, Kisfine.
Yeah.
And somebody says here, Turisk.
Oh, okay, right. Now those are towns that are now in Ukraine. So I don't like to try to be an expert on the Galician records. So the person you have to contact for further information would be Mark Halpern, who is the Mark is the AGAD archive coordinator. AGAD archives in Warsaw have the Galician records from right up to the war.
Mark, what's his name? Mark what?
Mark Halpern, Halpern. But if you go to the JRI Poland website and you go to the AGAD archives, do that through Google JRI Poland AGAD, you'll see Mark's name there with his email address. It's very simple, actually. It's mark@halpern.com.
This document came to me from Victoria in Rovno, Victoria Chimshit.
Really?
She found a few other incredible documents, but she said that nothing was kept. And this is why I'm asking you if the books of residence may have something.
Well, again, books of residence were not kept in Galicia. They had censuses, but not books of residence. Books of residence are ongoing control books, so that whoever lived in a house was documented, and the information relating to that family was added and subtracted. So if another child was born, it was added to the page. If somebody died, it would appear in the notes on the right-hand side when they died and what was the act number. If they married and moved to another town, that would be indicated. But this is a continuous look at the family in a specific location. This was not the type of record that was kept in Galicia. In Galicia, they made census records, which was a snapshot in time instead of a look at a family over a long period of time. Okay?
Okay, I will try to contact Mark. Thank
All
you.
right. Do you want to remove yourself from the sharing screen, please?
Stop sharing.
There we go. All right. Any other questions? No other questions. So let me just mention about something else that is happening. You probably are aware that Jewish Gen is trying to upgrade their website and all the rest of it. And one of the things that they have done recently, and you again probably aware of it, they've discontinued the mailing lists for Belarus, for Ukraine, for Romania, etc. And they now have this unified mailing list where you put the hashtag to emphasize the area or the item that you're posting about. So you'd have the name Poland. You might have other references, might be censuses, etc. And that's to draw you to look at those. One of the advantages of the merged system is basically in recognition of the fact that borders sometimes really don't matter. So if you're interested in a town today in Romania, it may have been part of Ukraine or that area. That's why in the new JRI Poland next generation system, we are going away from what we call the archival areas to the research areas. To explain what that means, at the present time, you have a number of towns in the Pultusk archives. You have a number of towns in the Lumja archives. At some point, there is a line between where those towns are located according to the archives. But in actual fact, and use the best example right off the bat, would be, let's say, Lumja and the town of Ostrolenka. They may be 40 kilometers apart, but that was a very strong, two towns with very strong family ties. If you're only looking in Pultusk, you're not going to find the information in Lumja. So when the current search in JRI Poland comes up, it is by the archival area for Lumja and the archival area for Warsaw, which Pultusk is part of. So we had to figure out a way to try to make the town leaders, the people who are helping researchers, more efficient in providing information by moving towns from what we call an archival area to a research archive area or a research area. So that's just an illustration of the adjustments being made by JRI Poland. In other countries, that's because Poland is so large. In other countries, you don't have that same kind of problem, but finding somebody who has expertise in your area can be a gold mine. And anybody who has not reached out to those listed in the Family Finder, even if they don't have your family name, one of the things that we've learned, and anybody who was who went to the conference, the virtual conference, and saw the presentation on documentations of Jewish, the new initiative for documentation of Jewish records worldwide. This is a new initiative to try to find every single source of genealogical information in any archive in any private holding, any museum, any university in the world. If you're not familiar with it, the website's not up yet, but if you have a particular interest in the topic, I'll be glad to send you the presentation that we made at the conference. And this is an initiative that's being led by Marlis Humphrey, the former head of the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies, and Sally Ann Sack, the editor of Avotenu, and I'm the third part of this triumvirate that has launched this project. And I can tell you that stuff comes from nowhere. We have learned over the years, in the case of JRI Poland, that there are so many people sitting at home with material that was passed on by grandparents and great-grandparents that is a treasure for Jewish genealogical research. At the conference in Warsaw in 2018, we presented the Polish State Archives with a book of records that a man in the United States donated to us from 1820, an incredibly well-preserved book that had been passed on through the generations. We scanned the book and we sent it and we handed it at the conference to the head of the Polish State Archives, totally by surprise. He was overwhelmed because every piece of documentation can be important. We say that every record counts. So that's why I'm saying you reach out to people, you ask them, do you have any information over and above what is readily available? Anybody have any more questions? No, no more questions. Okay.
Stanley, there's a question from YouTube, or a statement of somebody who's not familiar with JGS dashboard. Do you just want to
oh yeah, I'll
how
take
she gets to that, or mention it?
Okay, so let's we will now share screens. And we'll go to JGS of Montreal. No, that's not it. That's not what I want. So here's the JGS of Montreal website. And we'll go down here. Oh, this was the good old days when we met face to face. And here's the genealogy dashboard. And let's say we're looking for Pearson. And we're looking for Aaron Pearson. And I'm just taking a wild guess. Once we click go here, this entire list of sources is populated with the name Aaron Pearson. So let's see whether he's buried, whether we see him in Joburg. So we go to Joburg and we see 0 matches found. Okay, well, we tried Joburg. But maybe the name was spelled Aaron. And sure enough, there's one record. And we click on, and here's his grave. And notice that there is something called more information available at JGS Montreal. And this is one of Gary's great creations. We click on that. We see that he was buried at the Back River, in the B'nai Jacob section. And he was born in 1862, and he died in February 1938. Now that is, and then there's a map, and we can see where the cemetery is, I say where the grave is located. And then you could report some new information and add to that website. So this is an an invaluable source of additional information if you happen to find something from your family. In addition, let's go back now to the dashboard. If we're looking for the the Drouin collection, is he in the Drouin collection? Now this is searching Ancestry, not searching our website. And it doesn't seem to be coming out. Here we go. So here's Aaron Pearson, Montreal. His burial record is a birth record. This is his grandson. So one thing leads to another. And that's the important point of all genealogical research, is to build the, the trail. Then we look at the 1921 census. And here he is in the census with his wife, Annie. And you get the census record. So what we are seeing is a quick way to cover a lot of different sources. Now, maybe he's in the Montreal Circuit Court records. And it says 0. Again, we're going to change that. We're going to change that to A. There's still no. So this time we're going to say, well, maybe there's another spelling. So we'll just search Pearson in the Montreal Circuit Court. And there's Ugg, who is my mother's uncle by marriage. And if you look at the circuit court registrations, they're beautiful. Well, this happens to be a very early one, so it's not the sexy ones. This document is dated 1897. So that gives you an idea of the value of this. You also see all these sources of information. I know that the IAJGS is jealous of this. I have discussed it with them, and they're looking at the possibility of, I mean, I don't know when it's going to happen, of having Gary develop this for the IAJGS website, the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies. Basically, it is an improvement in many ways over Steve Morris's One Step. And if you're not familiar with Steve Morris's One Step, this is the website, and it's, again, a very important source of information. So if you take a look at the passenger lists, there are a number of different ways in which you can search the passenger list. If let's go to the passenger list, the gold form. And you can see that here's searching. All these are different ports. And you can search it by the gold form. You can search it by all ports, by all, the New York passenger live. And presumably everybody is familiar with this. Okay, so let me go back.
But Rotterdam is not included in this yet.
I'm sorry?
Rotterdam is not included yet.
Not yet. But if you write Steve Morris, he's probably looking at it already, because as you look at the Rotterdam search, it is laborious. You have to bring up a name. You have to be looking for a specific name. You don't have the flexibility, the flexibility of searching that you do with excuse me, with other ways of searching this kind of information. The challenge for Steve Morris has always been, how can you make it easier to find things? Now, is anybody here not familiar with the Lovell's City Directory in Montreal? Everybody's familiar with it. Are you familiar with how you research it? The easy way to search it.
I
So,
could use a review.
I'm sorry?
I could use a review.
Okay, so we'll share screens again, and we'll go to the dashboard again, and let's go to the dashboard. So let's say I want to see where my grandfather was living over a number of years. So I go to Max Diamond. I did this going through the volumes years ago. And now we got Max, no, given name Max Diamond, right. Surname, given name. Okay, so I want Lovell's, so I'm going to do it the fast way. Lovell's Montreal City Directory, Steve Morris, one step. So let's say I'm interested, and you can do it by street as well, to see who is living on the street next to your grandfather or grandmother. So I'm going to put in the surname Diamond, and I'm going to go to the name, but I want the year, let's say 1905. I don't know whether he should appear there. And we'll search. And what happens is the entire group of pages come up. It used to be before these pages are on the Quebec National Archives website, and that's what he's searching. So once it's fully loaded, I can go to Diamond someplace. And here we have Diamond, James Max, Royal Clothing Company, 31 St. Philip. He was a tailor in Poland, and he started a clothing company in Montreal. He was partners for some years with Scott from Scott Clothing. This is the way in which I followed. Now, if I want to see who was living nearby, we see that he was living on Royal Clothing, 31 St. Philip Street. So let's take a look at St. Philip Street. And we're going to go to the street directory. Now it's loading again. The important point here, of course, is that families live close together, particularly early in Montreal. Oh. Too many saints. So we go to 31 St. Philip. And we don't see my grandfather. Oh, well, but this gives you an illustration. And you see, for example, this is what's interesting, that unless there's another St. Philip, no, that should be it. Oh, here he is, Max Diamond the tailor. So we see that basically he was the only Jew on the street. Does that say anything about his willingness to be out there, do something different? But then you've got, Harry Adler living down the street, and Joe Wiseman, Sam Goodman. It's just another way of looking to see if you can find more information on your family, looking at your family history. And what I did, for example, was just plot my grandfather in the New York City Directory until 1898, and then in Montreal thereafter. Okay, so I'm going to go back again, stop sharing screens. In terms of other sources in Montreal, one of the things that some of you may remember who have ever used the Côte St. Luc Library, they had a whole wall full of telephone books from around the world. The reason why that's important is because the old telephone books give you information that you can't get by searching online today, unless these old telephone books were scanned. And they have been for some towns. I don't know what happened to that collection at the at the Côte St. Luc Library, but I know that when I first started, I went through a myriad of books, and that's where I found my family in Buenos Aires listed. It was just another source of information that when, pre-internet days, and I'm talking 1991, 1992, where we were looking for any scrap of information. And as a result, I found family in Argentina. I didn't know who they were. It was a unique surname. It wasn't until I got to Poland in 1995 and started doing work on the records in Poland that I was able to connect the people together. Still no questions, so I will go on with some other hints, some other tips. Another source of information in Montreal are the notarial records and the commercial records. There are notarial records, Andres, in a second, there are notarial records online, and you can actually get them on the Quebec National Archives website. There is a charge, but, and I'm not an expert at searching, but Gary Schroeder of the Quebec Family History Society is an expert. And if you want some help doing that, you can contact Gary. He's a professional. He won't charge that much, and he'll look for your family records in the notarial. And the notarial records, like I've said before, can be very interesting. In the case of my grandfather, a deed of sale, a deed of purchase, considerable amount of information that I wasn't aware of before. Gary Schroeder is the Quebec Family History Society. So just go into Google, put Quebec Family History Society, and you will get his email address. It starts with Crawford Park at something. In addition, there are the commercial records, and those as well. Again, I'm not sure that they're online, but they were in the Montreal City Hall. And they also have potentially valuable information. You know, when somebody's looking for Eisenbergs in Montreal and you don't know who, what, where, when, and you want to get every piece of information, there are a number of different locations. So in the case of, you know, saying of the documentation of Jewish records worldwide, if you're trying to find sources of information of any kind of Jewish content, does that qualify? The answer is yes, very much so. It may not be as useful as a birth record or a death record or a burial record, but it is additional information. And that's one of the things that the DOJR is trying to do. What was very interesting for us, hold on just a second, Vicky. What was very interesting for us is when we had this presentation at the conference, and the Australian genealogical societies, the various branches, immediately picked up on it and said, we want to research everything we can possibly find in Australia. And they came up with incredible amount of unique sources that we would have never thought of. And we're hoping to see that happen on a country by country basis. Australia, of course, has vast areas of unsettled people. So the concentration in the major cities is vital. The same would probably apply in Canada, the concentration of Jews in the major cities. The United States is a totally different situation, but it illustrates how one organization can respond and can help us find information on our families. Vicky, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, you see the little hand in the corner of Sue Ann's screen? There's a little logo of a hand. It means she has a question, I believe.
That's right.
Oh, I didn't see the hand. Where's the hand?
Can you see it? Do you see Sue Ann's rectangle?
Yeah.
In the upper left on my screen, there's a blue box with a white hand.
No. I've never.
That's weird. I can see it. Well, now I've told you anyhow, so go ahead.
Okay, Sue Ann.
Stanley, in talking about finding things, one of the things I would really love to investigate are wills. Now, you mentioned notarial records. Does that include wills, or is that something else?
It includes the wills as well.
Okay.
Now, I think that Ancestry has a index of Quebec wills. I think I'm just going from, but you could again use Google, do Quebec wills, and see what comes up.
And when you were mentioning about Gary Schroeder, is this something that I can do myself, even though it might be, you know, I'll have to teach myself, but is this something I can do?
Yes, you absolutely can do. It was quite complicated when it first went online. I don't know whether it's improved. I just I haven't had the time to actually investigate this source for all my family members.
Okay.
I probably have been remiss in not doing that. And let me give you one example of why every piece of paper counts. I never knew whether my grandfather became a Canadian citizen in the years that he was living in Montreal from 1898, before my he and my grandmother and their youngest son, my uncle George Diamond, moved back to New York. I never knew that. I couldn't find them in the Canadian naturalizations because the Canadian naturalizations start in 1915. The Montreal Circuit Court did not have him. I obtained the naturalization for my uncle Barney. And in my Canadian, in that Uncle Barney's naturalization, which only cost $5, it specifically states his father's naturalization number. I now know that he was a Canadian when he moved back to the United States. I'd never found any naturalization. So that is just another example. And a second one is in the 1940 Canadian National Registration. And if you're not familiar with that, it is a dynamite source of information. It is a census. It is basically a census that is open to the public, that was made in 1940 at a time when the government wanted to document every citizen during the wartime. And everyone over 16 and alien or citizen or resident had to submit a form. So there's a separate one for my grandmother, a separate one for my grandfather, for her children. And that was the, if you look at the JRI Poland website, on the left-hand side, there's an old couple. That's my great-grandparents. It wasn't until I got her sisters, and she was over 100 at the time, at the 1940 registration, that I discovered that my great-grandmother was born in a place called Suchowola, and not where she lived with her husband in Janov Sokolski. They're 20 kilometers apart, but 20 kilometers could mean a whole new opening. And it was, because with her surname, which I had learned, I was able to find family related to Suchowola. Then when I went to the Montreal Circuit Court database, which we have, I'm talking the database that's online, we don't have the pages, but we have the list. I was able to sort it by Suchowola and come up with other family in Montreal with slightly different variations of the name. So again, it's just an illustration, many different ways. Yes, Vicki.
I submitted a request for the record for my grandmother in the 1940 census. I had her name and I had where she was living at the time, 39, 40. And they took my money, but they claimed that they couldn't find anything. Does that happen very often?
The first time I've heard it.
Yeah.
But ask Alan Greenberg, because Alan has done a lot of that for a lot of people. And he may have some insight into that. Oh, and what Vicki is talking about is that the 1940 Canadian national registration, you actually have to pay $48.15 to get the file. So if you've got a lot
per file,
per person.
Per file.
Is this searchable online?
No. You have to start with the address where they were living. And what you have to do is always look at 39, 40, 40, 41, because those the census was taken over a period of time which didn't necessarily correspond to the national register, to the way in which the registration was created.
Got it.
Yeah, let me just, one other thing about this application. If you haven't seen all the different, it not only shows the place of birth of the person It shows the place of birth of the parents. So that is often very, very important for research overseas. It's in many cases, it's the only place where you'll see the multiple place of origin for different ancestors. Meryl, you're unmute yourself, Meryl.
Speaking of requesting documents, in July, Gary helped send in a request for naturalization. And he was told that he would receive it in October. And I was just in communication with him in the chat area. And he said that the Library and Archives Canada is not sending out any naturalization files now. And he doesn't, they say they don't have access to the archives. And I just wondered if anybody else had any more information on that situation.
Let's see. Yes, get in touch with Alan Greenberg, because we work closely with the archives. We're still waiting for them to put up the last batch of Canadian naturalizations for the last 5 years that my wife completed over a year ago, and that we submitted to Library and Archives Canada. And if anybody doesn't know, is my wife indexed the entire 600,000 Canadian naturalizations, which are on Library and Archives Canada.
I see. So Gary actually submitted the request. What is it that Alan Greenberg I can ask Gary?
I write to Alan, alan.greenberg@mcgill.ca. I write to and say, what is the latest situation as it applies to the Library and Archives Canada providing naturalization files? Part of the problem, of course, is the virus and their lack of, the reduced staff, because they don't have to serve people as much in the archives. So that's, it's been an effect of the virus.
Okay, thank you. Also, you had mentioned an article in the beginning of this session, and I thought you were going to send a link to the chat. Am I accurate? I don't see it.
Yes, I did. Right here. Hold on a second. This is the article.
When you say this, what do you
This is an article on a DNA helping a woman find her identity.
But when you're saying this, I don't know what you're pointing out. I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so let me go back here to Zoom. In the chat box, it says from me to Gary Perlman. Oh, it says privately. Oh God, hold on a second. Gewalt. My apologies. Copy.
Oh, okay. I was wondering what I was doing wrong.
Okay, hold on a second. Everyone. There it is.
Thank you.
I don't think Phil Greenberg is still online. Phil, if you're here, I don't think I have to send this to him. I'll have to, pardon me while I make a reminder to send this to him after the. Okay. I'm giving a talk to the Shara Shemayim group tonight on, and it's an interesting title. It's called DNA, Why Your Family Tree May Not Be Your Family Tree. And what I mean by that is that it's incomplete because you don't know of that second cousin, third cousin, second cousin, twice removed, who is trying to find her or his identity. A child, a baby given to a non-Jewish family in Lithuania, in Poland, wherever, who's grown up not knowing who they are. And DNA has absolutely been a wonder in helping people find their identity. And I tell the story of two people, not this one here. This one is very current, and I haven't integrated in the one that I've just sent the link for. But a couple of other stories why your family tree may not be your family tree. One of the stories, of course, I say of course because you're probably not aware of it, but of Eli Oren of Israel. Eli Oren grew up Israel, father, mother, sister, and one day he's searching on JRI Poland, and he sees the Monitor Polski, the Polish Gazette entry for his father showing deceased. His father is alive, but he was so reluctant to get his father involved because his father was still extremely resistant to sharing anything about his about his life before the Holocaust. After his father died, 8 years later, he wrote me and he said, "What is the story behind this?" I said, "Well, you have to get the court records because this is based on a court record." The court records were 50 pages, 50 pages, all sorts of information. What was the premise behind it? It was his first wife getting him declared dead so that she could move on. She could remarry. She did not know that he survived. He did not know that she survived. The next thing that happened is he saw his father's first wife and 2 children listed. He then tried to find them, who they are, what, maybe they survived the 2 children. And one thing led to another. He found in a page of testimony the sister of his first wife listed as the informant of the death in the family. He tracked down the first wife's family. She had passed on. The sister of the first wife. But somebody knew about her. She had remarried and had 2 more children. He called this one man 20 minutes away from him in Warsaw as a result of what family had told him in Seattle. He called and he spoke to the daughter-in-law of this man, and he said, "I'm looking for Moishik Oren, etc., etc." And she said, and the family of my father's first wife. And he said, "Oh, you want to talk to your brother, Arik." And she put his half-brother on the phone, a man he never knew existed. Why? Because his father had been in the Russian army. And when he was in the Russian army and he never reported back to his wife, she thought he was deceased. But the amazing part of this story was that his first wife went to visit a family at a nearby kibbutz in 1960. And they were talking about the neighbors, and the neighbors mentioned Alter Oren, a next door neighbor. Alter Oren, that's the name of her first husband. Must be a first cousin. Must be a cousin. She knocked on the door with her little daughter, and they both stood there horrified, totally shocked. Why? Because in Israel, the rabbis say you have to get a divorce. You weren't divorced. Your first wife, your marriage to your first wife is the legal marriage. And so the daughter who was watching this couldn't understand what she was seeing. Why this man turned white, why he gently closed the door. Anyway, they met 3 weeks later, and his father, Alter, met his son, Arik. But he never told his first wife and children. And for 10 years, they met secretly, and they went to, and he took his wife to his son's wedding, Arik's wedding, and told her this was family from Poland, did not say that this was his son. And when his son was sworn to secrecy that he would not contact Arik's new family, Alter's new family. So if it hadn't been for the Monitor Polski entry, Eli Oren would never have found his half-brother Arik. So that is another example of when I say your family tree is not your family tree. You never know who's out there looking for you. That's also one of the important reasons why we say you have to put yourself out there, meaning to say, get a DNA, even though, people say, oh, it's going to be used in this bad way. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, if they find a criminal in my family, sein gesund. Andre, it's just one last thing. The other thing, keep in mind, is that in the old days, 1950, 1960, 1970, it was so important for women to put their maiden name in the phone books so they could be found. Putting your name on Jewish Gen in the family finder is vital. And we had a situation at a workshop, I've told it many times, where somebody mentioned that they came from Alsace-Lorraine. We found somebody with the same name searching for Alsace-Lorraine, turned out to be a second cousin. That's why it's important to do that. Andres, yes, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Andres.
While he's unmuting, I just want to let you know it's 11:58. I don't know how long you want to keep going.
It's just a story I want to tell, but it's not so important.
I'm sorry?
Somebody that I met online, doesn't matter who it was, and I found out that his father was Jewish, and he was so elated, but now he won't talk about it.
That's also one of the interesting things that happens. We see this in the genealogical world, many posts on Jewish Gen, etc. People discover through DNA, and I can go on with 25 stories about that they have a Jewish father and a Jewish mother or a grandparent. And in the JRI Poland presentation at the conference, I tell the story how Michael Tobias was asked to help a woman who had found that she knew she was brought up by a man who wasn't her father, but she found out her father was Jewish. And through DNA and JRI Poland data going back to the 1700s in order to triangulate family, Michael Tobias starting in July 10th, found that the man who turned out to be Yankel or Jack Berliner, a member of the Polish army in England during the war, fathered 4 different children by 4 different women. 2 of them were born a month apart by 2 different women. So as Michael called him, Jack the Lad. Jack the Lad left. Now this Jack had been married before the war. His wife and 2 kids, he divorced his wife. They were in Belgium. They survived. They got to the United States. And when their Jack's grandchildren in the United States found out about this, they were horror struck. So when it came to a question of having everybody meet, because MyHeritage wanted to really play this one up, it was MyHeritage that played a key role. They said, no way, no way, no way. This is something that they didn't want to be part of. But again, it illustrates the power of DNA and records put together. Okay, yes, Sue Ann Ray.
Stanley, just talking about the DNA again. Oh, I did mine many years ago with, was it Family Tree DNA, I think it is? I have different family members doing 23andMe. You know, it's all coming from all over the place. Who's good? How do we register it? Where do we put it so we can mix and match?
Okay, you can upload your family tree DNA results to ancestry.com and to MyHeritage. Not to, I don't think to 23andMe. So once you do that, you have the benefit of the other databases. Also, you can upload it to GEDmatch, and everyone can be uploaded to GEDmatch. GEDmatch is a meeting ground of all the DNA results from all the different companies.
Right.
You upload what's called the raw data. And if you go online, how do I upload my raw data to, you'll basically get that information right away.
Is what I got or did, say, 12 or 14 years ago relevant today? Do I have to do it again? Is there
no, your DNA does not change. Your DNA does not.
I know. But like, let's say I took the mitochondrial one instead of the other one or whatever. Like,
that's different.
Yeah.
That's different. You know, from all I can tell you is I have the Y DNA, the mitochondrial DNA, and the family finder DNA. Now, for those who don't know, you know, the Y DNA is my paternal line. The mtDNA, the mitochondrial, is my maternal line. That goes unchanged. In fact, that article that I posted the link to makes that clear.
Okay.
Because well, you have to read the article to know why this is so important to me. Why this was so shocking to me.
May I add something?
Yeah.
I did Y-DNA for my cousin only 2 years ago, but I got in touch with, I think it was, whatever it was, and I said, can you still use the same DNA that he submitted? And they checked, so I just paid for the other test, but they used the DNA that he had submitted. I don't know how long it lasts and how long they can do it.
No, they have it preserved. I have done the additional, let's say they call this the big Y with family tree DNA, 111 markers. So I paid to have that 111 markers done, which is sort of an upgrade. And there will be more and more upgrades. And what's happening with DNA is that the databases are growing and growing. And if you followed it, the origins, because of the variations in the DNA, what was a tree at the beginning when family tree DNA started, and you saw, you know, perhaps this 4 different groups. Those 4 different groups are now 150 different groups, the split off of the of the DNA. For example, the reason I got involved in family history was, of course, to trace the family, the genetic trait of my family, the beta thalassemia genetic trait. We couldn't figure out where it came from. And after I did 12 markers, that was the first test with family tree DNA, 12 markers. There was a match with a man from Italy with basically Sephardic roots, not Jewish. And also then we had, sort of matches with people who had Portuguese ancestry. However, that link to Portugal or to that ancestry disappeared at 25 markers, that it became so infinitesimal, it was no longer, I won't say it wasn't valid, it wasn't meaningful. And so as a result, as more and more, as the database gets larger and more sophisticated analysis of possible of DNA, we will learn more about our family history.
Sue has her hand up again.
Sue Ann Ray?
No,
No.
No, me.
Oh, you, Sue
yeah.
Diamond. Hi.
Hi. Okay, so one thing you said, I think it was probably accidental, was that you could transfer into Ancestry, but you can't. Ancestry won't take
No, I said you can upload Ancestry
to others.
to GEDmatch. Yeah, some of them.
And also you can upload it to Family Tree DNA and to MyHeritage as well.
Thank you. Yes. And there was something else. Oh, I lost it now. Something else that you said. But yeah, I know what I wanted to say was that 2 years ago, Ancestry changed the chip that they're using, and FTDNA didn't. And there was one example given at a session I was at, that two sisters tested, one with FTDNA and one with Ancestry. And when they did the transfer, the one sister had 2,000 on FTDNA, and the sister who transferred only had 200. And I've noticed my matches on FTDNA, because they use a lot more places that they check the markers. My matches are quite different from Ancestry. So somebody that might be a second to fourth cousin on FTDNA, maybe like a fifth cousin on Ancestry, or they may be missed altogether because they took out a section to do the health. And so, yeah, so that's just a caution for people who are transferring.
Well, I will tell you, the best example of that, if you will, I have twin daughters, identical twin daughters. They do not have 100% matching DNA because there's environmental changes that happen. And that is a lesson that
Right.
DNA is not static, it changes. And even with, two sisters, one may have inherited a lot more of her father's DNA than the mother's. So that gives you an idea of why you have to, sort of look at the DNA as a tool and not a perfect answer. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you to Madeline and thank you to Marilyn and Vicky for organizing. Bless you, ladies. Much appreciated. And we'll see you all again.